My name is Justine Mullen, and today I am applying for the Spanish position of the Cheraho School District. I am teaching Spanish 3, which is my junior class, subjunctive as well as vocabulary from chapters 8A and 8B from the Realidades textbook. It covers vocabulary on destinations and traveling. I hope you enjoy.
The students are reviewing for final exams. So far this week, we have covered Chapter 7A and Chapter 7B, cooking vocabulary along with commands, informal and formal. As you know, the lesson I am describing for you today covers two chapters, 8A and 8B, on traveling and destination vocabulary, along with a review of the subjunctive. This lesson spans over 2 class periods. For the first day, we covered 8A vocabulary, which focuses on booking trips, airport necessities, up to becoming a tourist. The students were given a choice in which review packet they would like. They could either travel to Egypt or Paris. I chose these 2 locations because as we look into the packet, I noticed that some pictures had specific details relating to these destinations. Like in the Paris packet. The travel agent is holding a Paris brochure. The tourist is in Paris. And even the luggage has a Paris sticker. Small details, I know, but I thought I would add to the story the students were asked to create. Before they could write this story, the students were first asked to define each picture using their 8A vocabulary. Since this is a review, I encourage the students to do this without looking at their vocab sheets, but if necessary, their sheets were on hand to reference. Once they labeled all the pictures, they were asked to number the pictures in order they think each one would occur. I said to them, imagine you wake up in the morning and you say, I want to go on a trip today. What would you need to do to be on your flight on the way to Paris or Egypt? Once the students have put the pictures in order, they have to use at least half of the vocabulary words, that's at least 12, to create a story. For this specific class, a college prep class, some students have ADHD and anxiety, and instead of having them worry about grammatical errors, I want them to strictly focus on our objective for the day, the vocabulary. Therefore, the students are going to write their story in English, and when they want to use a vocabulary word, they need to write this word in the target language, in Spanish. Why put the words into a story? I was thinking to myself, how do people memorize lines in a play? They know what comes next. They know how the story flows. I wanted the students to create this similar feeling, this technique. I want them to write a story where they can anticipate the next vocabulary word. I go to the travel agency to see the travel agent. I go to the travel agency to see the agente de viajes, the travel agent. It just flows. It's what you expect to come next. Here are a few student samples. This is a more advanced student. For those advanced students, I encourage them to use more vocab and create more complex sentences. For instance, Michaela arrived to her puerta de embarque on time, but the empleada made an anuncio that the flight was retraso. As you can see here, this student used well more than 15 vocabulary words, and in this sentence she used 4. It was a complex, advanced sentence that I expected from my more advanced learners. Let me show you a sample from one of my average students. She included 12 just as she was assigned to do, but let me read you one. Sadly, our flight was retraso. They made an anuncio that our flight was back on. Here, she said, sadly, our flight was delayed. They made an announcement that our flight was back on. Those are 2 separate sentences. Both get their point across, but not as complex as the previous student. Even though one may seem more advanced than the other, both obtained the objective for the day, and I was very pleased with what they produced. As the students were finishing their stories, I had them read their own work to each other. Every time the student came to a vocabulary word, the partner was to say what that word meant in English, to practice their vocabulary recognition. With about 5 minutes left of class, I had one student share out loud their story, and as a class we defined the vocabulary as we came across it line by line. At the very end of class on the first day, I told the students that tomorrow they will be working on 8B vocabulary, which is traveling and destination vocabulary. And while they are working on their given activity, I will be reviewing the subjunctive within small groups, pulling them aside from the internet and from their work in order to work with them in a more intimate setting to get their grammar extra fine-tuned and ready for the exam. On the second day, the students were in the language lab, and they were given an activity on Chapter 8B vocabulary, as seen here. The students were told to identify the vocabulary below, then research information on that vocabulary in the location they were traveling to. For example, one of their vocab words was palace, palacio. Then say the student decided to travel to England for this activity. They may research and find Buckingham Palace. They would write Buckingham Palace next to the vocab word, and thus you would see palace, palacio, Buckingham Palace in one fluid motion. I believe that by asking the students to explore these interesting countries gives them an opportunity to put an image to the vocab word. It is one thing just to identify a vocab word, but it's another to find a beautiful piece of architecture that matches with it, or a picture of someone enjoying themselves on the water of the Dominican Republic. I really do think that seeing these images will improve their word recognition capabilities, that will not only prepare them for the final, but for their future endeavors in Spanish. As students are working on the worksheet, I will be working with students in groups of 4 to practice the subjunctive with this packet. This gives the students an opportunity to review an older tense and ask questions. They may not remember this tense as well as the future tense, the one that we have most recently been working on. The subjunctive can be confusing, and thus I really want to work intimately with the students so that they can ask me their questions, feel comfortable working with me, and truly get a grasp of the subjunctive mood. The students were assigned groups as they came into the language lab. They would see a piece of paper with their name and a number. I would call the groups up by number, and knowing who was in each group, to make sure that they would get the review and make sure that they were on task to come forward and to participate. If students did finish their work early, on the bottom of their worksheet, they were given an online resource to practice their vocabulary from these chapters as well as the subjunctive. The students were prompted to go to this website and were reminded that I would be walking around and making sure that everyone was on task and available if anyone has any questions.